Just before this episode, I wanted to tell you you can get more from Never a Truer Word by subscribing on Spotify. If you are a Spotify listener, and 90% of you are according to the stats, then you can subscribe to get early access to the weekly episodes, video episodes so you can follow along with the statements, exclusive subscriber episodes, and a chance to leave comments for future episodes too. Go to the Spotify page for Never a Truer Word and press subscribe or unlock. And if you do decide to subscribe, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hello and welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and give you some hints and tips on how to understand what people are really saying to you in everyday life. We're going to look at Alec Baldwin in this episode. At the time of recording, the trial is about to start and get underway for his involuntary manslaughter charge connected with a shooting on the set of the film Rust. What happened there? Well, Halyna Hutchins was a cinematographer on that film, and during a rehearsal, or maybe not even a rehearsal for one of the scenes, a gun went off, struck her, and she died afterwards. The armourer of the film, Halyna Hutchins, she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter over that shooting. She was not looking after the ammunition or the guns correctly. That's what the court found. And now Alec Baldwin also faces an involuntary manslaughter charge. And this is around, did he pull the trigger of the gun or not? You see, over the past 2.5 years, Alec Baldwin has maintained he did not pull the trigger and does not know how live ammunition ended up in the prop gun. Okay, he told ABC News he had no idea how a live bullet got onto the set of his film, but that he didn't pull the trigger on the firearm. Now, no idea, if you're a regular here, you'll know that no idea can be a problematic phrase. Also, he has said, I would never point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger at them, never. And that word never is another red flag word. Well, Alec Baldwin was interviewed by the police very shortly after the incident. In fact, the cinematographer was not even dead at the point that he was interviewed by the police. The full police interview is over an hour long. We're not going to look at all of it here. I'm going to look at a couple of things. Specifically, did he talk about pulling the trigger? Did he talk about shooting the gun when he was talking to the police that day? But having watched the whole thing, I've got some observations already. Alec Baldwin loves talking about how movies are made, and there's two detectives there with him, and he loves describing the secrets of movie making to them. He loves talking about himself, especially as the star of movies. Also, although we will see him say he is not a gun guy, he loves showing his knowledge of guns and film guns off a lot. And the other thing I noticed is he's not very big on the names of people on the crew. He's not very close to them at all. Doesn't know a lot of them by name, especially the woman involved in the making of that film. So are you ready? Here's part one of Alec Baldwin in the police interview. He's been read his rights. This is the first thing the detectives say to him of any note, and it's a really easy question. Just listen to how he answers it.
Long day?
Well, what's interesting, not to digress on some commentary here, that we've done this for 2 weeks and we did it the right way every day. Every day. You're on a set, you rehearse, they bring you what's called a cold gun. The gun is either completely empty, the chambers, or there is a cosmetic piece. So, for example, if you're the camera, and this is going to sound silly and specific, but if I'm pointing a gun close to the camera, you want to see into the cylinder that there's material in there, cosmetic material. So those rounds are cosmetic rounds. They put them in, and you rehearse, or even in a shot when you don't fire. I pull the gun, and you see there's some material inside the cylinder. They'd hand me a cold gun, no charges. They always hand you a cold gun with nothing in it to rehearse.
So she starts off noticing the big sigh that he gives, and she asks a question. It's a statement, but she turns it into a question. She says, long day. Now, the full answer Alec Baldwin gives to the question, long day, is 8 minutes long. 8 minutes long. And that's going to be very interesting, because the first thing you'll see is that he starts with, well, what's interesting, not to digress in some commentary here, He doesn't say whether it's been a long day or not. He doesn't answer the question. And this is a huge indicator that he's dodged the question, which was a really simple question to answer. And he's going to talk about what is important to him. What's the important things for him to get across? So when we look at what those things are, it'll be very revealing about where his thought processes are at the moment, what his state of mind is at the moment. To help us out even more, he begins the answer to the question long day with the word well. And when someone starts an answer with well, that's an indication of, hey, I'm going to change the narrative here. I'm going to give you something that you didn't ask for. I'm flagging it up with the word well. What I have to say here is more important than answering your question. So even if we didn't see that he didn't answer the question of long day, the word well at the start of it, well, that would tell us that something is coming here, which is not answering the question, but that the answerer of the question, Alec Baldwin in this case, thinks is more important to say, very important for him to say. So now we know he didn't answer the question, and he started with well. So what's coming next is what he wants to get across. It's the priority for him to talk about. He even flags it up with some more when he says, well, what's interesting, not to digress on some commentary here, and then he does digress on some commentary. A great example there of when someone states something in the negative, tells you what's not happening or what didn't happen, chances are those things are happening or may have happened. Certainly they are focused on them, even though they're saying it's not. I'm not going to digress in some commentary here. He does, because he's flagged it up. I'm not going to digress in some commentary here, but I'm going to. And the rest of what he says, well, the first thing I notice is that he says, we've done this for 2 weeks and we did it the right way every day. Every day. You're on the set, you rehearse, they bring you what's called a cold gun. The gun is either completely empty, the chambers, or there's a cosmetic piece. So, for example, if you're the camera, and this is going to sound silly and specific, but I'm pointing the gun close to the camera, you want to see into the cylinder that there's material in there. So he says, we've done this every day for 2 weeks. We did it the right way every day, and gives an example of what happened. So he's being very general here. He's not being specific. Given that a huge incident has happened on the set, the most important thing he wants to get across is that this has been done safely for 2 weeks. Every day it's been done the right way, and he gives an example of what should happen. But what he doesn't talk about, and we know this is a priority for him because he's talking about this and not the specific incident that must be high up in everyone's mind because it happened that day. He wants to get across, and it's very important for him to get across, that what happens every day has been safe, but he doesn't deal with this specific incident. He even flags it up to us and says, this is going to sound silly and specific. No, it doesn't sound silly and specific. It sounds very, very general. And there's a bit of distancing here. He uses the word you, where he could have said I. He could have said I or we, or on the set where we're rehearsing and we always use a cold gun, or I'm on the set, I'm rehearsing, I've got a cold gun. But he uses you. So he doesn't say what he did. He says what you would do. You're on a set, you rehearse, they bring you what's called a cold gun. And in fact, in that opening part, the only time he says the word I is very interesting because it's I'm pointing the gun close to the camera. So the example he gives is the most specific thing, which is what happens if you're rehearsing and you've got a gun and you're pointing it close to the camera. But he doesn't say that's what happened in this situation. But he does say, I'm pointing the gun close to the camera there, whereas the rest of it is just you. He continues, they put them in and you rehearse, or even in a shot where you don't fire. If I hold this, you see the material inside the cylinder. They'd hand me a cold gun, no charges. They always hand you a cold gun with nothing in it to rehearse. Once more, we have a real distance there. So they put them in and you rehearse in a shot where you don't fire. So this is not him talking about himself or this specific incident at all. He's talking real general terms again. And they hand me a cold gun, no charges. Who is they? Just some distant person. They always hand you a cold gun, and we've got that word always in there as well. So he's really talking in real general terms here about something, frankly, that happened to someone else. So he was asked the question, long day, and he gave us so much information. We still don't know whether he's had a long day or not, because he's got across what it is that's important for him to get across, which is, in general, in some vague theoretical terms, things have always been done safely. Now, why would he want to get that across? Why is that the most important thing for him to get across, and not what happened in this specific incident where two people have been taken to hospital as a result of a gun going off. That must be high up in his mind, but more important for him to talk about is what happens in general. Here's some more from Alec Baldwin's police interview.
Now, I went to lunch. She disarmed me. I sat down.
She being
Hannah, the armaments person. She was always handling the guns, or 99% of the time. So I would, if I had a cosmetic rifle with no rounds, I would probably hand it to one of her assistants. I'm sitting there. She disarms me. We go to lunch. We come back from lunch, and they hand me the revolver, the Colt.
And I just like the name. It's Hannah again.
They arm me, and you're assuming, as we've done every time, that it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. And I put the gag in the shot. You're the camera because I have a coat, and I have a holster, and I pull the coat over, and I kind of cup my hands like I folded my hands. And then I'm going to slowly sneak the revolver, the Colt out, and turn and shoot these other guys, or try to shoot them. I take the coat over the thing, the camera's there. I believe, my recollection is she was there, turned a bit, like talking to him. So I think she was hit in the right armpit. But this is all I know, and that is that I take the gun out in the rehearsal. He wants it very dramatic and very slow. I'm trying to sneak up on them. I take the gun out, and as as it clears, as the barrel clears, I turn and cock the gun in the rehearsal. I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun. Nothing. No flash charges, nothing. Now, this is a puzzle to me, and this is making me very emotional now, but in my time, and I'm older now, but when I was younger and I was shooting guns in films, I've never seen a theatrical flash round where the material went through someone's armpit, came out their body, and hit somebody else in the shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if your department is prepared to go find out what comes out of his shoulder surgically. Is that a live round?
Now we're getting into the specifics. He starts off saying, no, I went to lunch, she disarmed me. And the detective says, she being, and he says, Hannah, the armaments person, she was always handling the guns 99% of the time. So I would, if I had a cosmetic rifle with no rounds in it, I handed it to one of her assistants. Once more, though, although we're getting specific, he starts talking about the general again. She was always handling the guns. 99% of the time, Hannah was handling these guns. So he's gone to the general again, even though he's just start by saying, I went to lunch. He gets very stuttery here as well. So I think the tension is coming up now that he's being asked to talk about the incident that happened and not dealing with things in general. He stutters on Hannah's name or tries to find Hannah's name. So it's Hannah. She was always handling the guns. And then it was 99% of the time. And then he says, so I would, if I had a cosmetic rifle. So he's starting to get a little bit stuttery quite often. That indicates that there is tension, stress, potentially stuttering because he's choosing his words very carefully and wants to make sure that he gets the words exactly right. He starts with the very specific. Now, I went to lunch. And then he says, she disarmed me. Now, I went to lunch, specific, and it's the most specific thing we've heard him say in the breakdown that we're looking at here so far. I went to lunch and she disarmed me. Now, that's out of order. That's really interesting because I'm presuming that she didn't disarm him at lunch. I'm presuming that she should have at very least disarmed him before he went to lunch. He was doing a scene, there was guns involved. She would disarm him and then he would go for lunch. And this is out of order. And I wonder why that is. Sometimes when we're telling a story, we remember something that's very important to say. So we have to jump back in time. Sometimes when we're making things up, we realise that, I haven't mentioned that and the rest of it won't make sense, so I'm going to have to go out of time and say something that happened prior to the bit of the story that I'm in. But it's very interesting that he's told that part out of order. He carries on, I'm sitting there, she disarms me, we go to lunch, we come back from lunch, and they hand me the revolver, the Colt. The detective says once more, I'd just like some names. And he says, Hannah, they arm me. And you're assuming, as we've done every time, that it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. And I put the gag in the shot, you're the camera, because I have a coat and I have a holster, and I pull the coat over and I kind of cut my hands like I fold with my hands. And then I'm going to slowly sneak the revolver, the Colt out and turn it, shoot these other guys or try and shoot them. So this time we do seem to have things in order, because he starts there with, I'm sitting there, she disarms me, we go to lunch, we come back from lunch, and they hand me the revolver. So now we've got the story in order, that he was disarmed before he went to lunch. And then he cannot help talking in these general terms. He says, you're assuming, as we've done every time, it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. Who's assuming? Well, it wasn't him. He doesn't say, I'm assuming it's a cold gun. He says, you're assuming it's a cold gun. Why is he using the word you're there? There's a couple of reasons we could do that. Number one is that he didn't assume. Which is why he can't say I, because we find it quite hard to lie, to say I'm assuming if we weren't assuming, and we may say you're assuming, or we may be trying to socialize it and to kind of make the person we're talking to put themselves in our place. That's why you're assuming. Everyone would assume that it's a cold gun, but he says you're assuming. He does not say that he was assuming there, but he does take ownership of lots more. He takes ownership of every single action that he describes there with the word I. I have a coat. I have a holster. I pull the coat over. I kind of cut my hands. I fold with my hands. I'm going to slowly sneak the revolver. So he talks about himself and his own actions there. Once more, he's in the general. You're assuming, as we've done every time, that it's a cold gun for the rehearsal. So he really, really wants to get across that things have been done properly there. But actually, potentially what he's just saying is this is the first incident that we've had. That really could be what he's saying there. As we've done every time, could just be that there have been no incidents so far. Alec Baldwin continues, I take the Colt out of the, it's unclear what he says there, it must be holster or something like that. I take the coat out of the, whatever, the camera is there. I believe, my recollection is, she was there, turned a bit like talking to him, I think she was hit in the right armpit. So once more, we've got the ownership there. I take the Colt out, is what he says. I take the Colt out. So he is owning the action again. So in his own words, he has the gun there. But then the next bit, the camera is there. I believe, my recollection is, she was there, turned a bit like talking to him. I think she was hit in the right armpit. There is a big bit missing in the story there. And that is the bit where the gun went off. He skips right over that. The most important part of the story is that this gun went off with ammunition inside it. And he skips right over that bit in this telling of what happened. And when he does talk about it, she was hit is very, very passive. It's not the bullet hit or the ammunition hit or anything like that. It's very passive. She was hit. He continues, but this is all I know. And that is I take the gun out in the rehearsal when he wants it very dramatic and very something unclear, sneak up on them. I take the gun out and then it clears. As the barrel clears the holder, I turn and cock the gun, something unclear. I turn and cock the gun, he says again, the gun goes off. This is all I know is how he starts it. And that is kind of, this is all I know. There is nothing more. Do not ask me any more questions about this. I am being transparent. I am being honest. I am telling you everything I know, but please don't ask me any more questions. Please accept this as a full telling of what I was saying. Why is that? Is he very sensitive about this? Well, the fact he's missed out the most important part of the story already in this telling, which is the gun going off. He's wanting to say, please just listen to me tell this once and don't ask any more questions. Just accept what I've said as my version of events. He owns it again. I take the gun out. And then he seems to blame someone else, the director or something like that. He wants it very dramatic. So he's not owning the drama that was happening there. He's not saying I was being very dramatic or I was told to be very dramatic even. He's not owning the drama at all. He's blaming the drama on someone else. He wants it very dramatic. And then he does own the next actions. I take the gun out. I turn and cock the gun. I turn and cock the gun. He says twice. And this is the nub of what Alec Baldwin is saying, is that he cocked the gun and it went off. He didn't squeeze the trigger. He cocked the gun and it fired and hit the cinematographer. So I turn and cock the gun. I turn and cock the gun. And then he says, the gun goes off. What's interesting here is he doesn't say how the gun goes off. It's very passive. It's the gun goes off. Now, guns tend not to go off. Something makes a gun go off. They don't just go off on their own. Certainly in his very first telling here in the police interview, he doesn't say how the gun went off. So he doesn't say, I cocked the gun and it went off and I wasn't expecting it, or I don't know how the gun went off. My fingers weren't on the trigger, or I didn't squeeze the trigger. He doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say really unexpectedly, or I got the fright of my life when the gun got off. There is nothing like that stated. It's just the gun goes off, the inanimate object getting the blame for the action. But certainly he doesn't say how. So I'm building up a picture here. The first time he took a pass through this story, he missed off the gun going off entirely. And now this time he says he cocked the gun and the gun goes off. But he didn't say as soon as I cock the gun goes off. Or he doesn't say there's any mystery or surprise to him about the gun going off. He carries on. It's supposed to be a cold gun. Nothing, no flash charges, nothing. Now, this is a puzzle to me. It's making me very emotional. In my time, and I'm older now, but when I was younger and I was shooting guns in films, I've never seen a theatrical flash round where the material went through someone's armpit, came out their body and hit somebody else in the shoulder. I'm wondering if your department is prepared to go and find out what comes out of his shoulder surgically. Is that a live round? He does say this is a puzzle to me. And he makes it very clear that this is a puzzle to him. And the puzzle to him, if you just know, is not that the gun went off. It's the fact that there was something in the gun, that there was some ammunition in the gun, that someone got hit by this gun going off. But that is a puzzle to him. He doesn't say there's any puzzle at all about how that gun went off. The rest of it is all the same theme. It's what's happened in his career. It's what happened in general. It's the fact that this was all a huge surprise to him because this is not what has happened in the past. And it's the same theme that he returns to again and again and again in this police interview. What are you thinking? Your comments are always welcome on the platform. You can get in touch on social media. All the links are in the show description, or you can do it if the comments are available to you on this platform. The like button helps this get out to so many people. Something like this takes hours to get together and record and make for you. The like button takes 0.3 of a second to hit, and that means that it gets to more people. If you know people that are interested in the Alec Baldwin story or are interested in the trial, then feel free to share this with them. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get more like this as and when it happens. And if you want early access to episodes plus exclusive content too, then if you're watching on YouTube, you can become a member of the channel to get early access and all the exclusive episodes as well. Or if you're listening on Spotify, then subscribe and you'll be able to get that early access and exclusive content as well. Here's another bit from Alec Baldwin's police interview.
And so when I shoot the gun, so in the rehearsal, I'm assuming I have an empty gun, and the gun goes off, she's right in front of me. Mm-hmm. She's as far from me as I am from difference between maybe you and the door.
Okay. So pretty close proximity.
It was a very tight shot. Okay. The shot was here. Of me, not of me, it's of me pulling the gun slowly, turn cock. Okay. And she's right there, vulnerable, in a position she wouldn't ordinarily be if we were shooting, and this thing, boom, she hits the ground.
So he starts there. And so when I shoot the gun, something's unclear, but in rehearsal, I'm assuming I have an empty gun. She's right there in front of me. She is as far from me as I am, the difference between maybe you and the door. So he uses the words, when I shoot the gun there, which seems quite specific. He's talking about shooting the gun, but is he just talking in general about what happens when he shoots the gun in rehearsal? Interesting. He says, I'm assuming I have an empty gun. Now, if you weren't going to fire, if you weren't going to pull the trigger, why are you assuming the gun is empty? Why is that even in your mind? It's a prop gun that you are using to recreate this shot. But he's telling us right there, I am assuming I have an empty gun. Then he gets really specific on what was happening in this incident. He says, it was a very tight shot. And this is about the film shot here, not the shot of the gun. It was a very tight shot. The shot was here, not of me. It's of me pulling the gun, slowly, turn cock. And she's right there in a position she wouldn't ordinarily be if we were shooting. And there's something unclear, boom, she hits the ground. So he does mention cocking the gun there. Turn, cock, and she's right there. So he mentions cocking the gun. But once more, big bit missing. It's not that the gun went off. It's not that when he cocked it, the gun went off and he wasn't expecting that. He doesn't say he pulled the trigger, but there's a big big bit missing. It's just boom. Once more, there's no mystery. He doesn't say, I wasn't expecting the gun to go off. He doesn't say that I cocked it and it went off. He doesn't say any of that. Now, to be fair, he doesn't say I pulled the trigger, but there's big bit missing. Twice now when he's told this story, he misses out the words that reflect the actions taken when the gun went off. You'll notice that he's dropped some of the pronouns there. So he doesn't say I cock the gun. He's just cock. Someone cocks the gun, but he doesn't put himself in there. And he doesn't mention the name of the person that's been shot. She's right there. She wouldn't be there. She hits the ground, which is that thing that he's not very clear on the names of the people that he was working with in the films. Let's have some more.
So whether someone accidentally, and I can't even imagine this, deliberately placed a live round in that gun, I've never heard of that in my life, and I don't know anything about what happened, but all I know is when I... See, the other thing about this is, in a live round, you'd have a recoil, usually. When I shot that gun and it went off, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it for what happened to happen. When that happened I'm always told, but because I'm not a gun person, I don't own a gun, they've always told me, they asked me to simulate the recoil. When I shoot the Colt, which is a big gun, 45 caliber bullet, they always teach me when we should go action. I go, get back here, boom, and they make me take my hand and go boom and have the kick, because there's no kick in a flash round.
Okay.
And when this happened, I don't recall there being any kick either. That's important.
So he says, so whether someone accidentally, and I can't even imagine deliberately placed a live round in that gun. I never ever heard of it in my life, and I don't know anything about what happened, but all I know is when I see the other thing about this is in a live round, you'd have a recoil usually. There's his favourite phrase, I never ever heard of it in my life. This just does not happen usually in life, and he very often wants to take the conversation away from this specific incident and move it away into things that have happened in his life, things that have happened in general. He said, I don't know anything about what happened, and he's very clear about that. I don't know anything about what happened. Now, don't know is quite a reliable phrase to hear. Truthful people don't mind telling us what they don't know. They'll tell us what they know. They'll tell us all they know, and they're quite happy to say, I don't know this, so I don't know anything about what happened. I would believe that he did not know there was a live round or whatever it was inside that gun. And then he does say, all I know is... And then he goes on to tell another story about the recoil. So we don't actually know what all I know is. You'll see he gets very stuttery again. He's talking about the specific incident and his words get much more stuttery than when he's talking in the general. I've never heard of it in my life. Is quite easy, but it's like, I don't know. All I know, I see. He gets very stuttery and nervous and stressed, I think, about talking about this specific incident. Then he says, when I shot the gun and it went off, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it to do for what happened to happen. When that happened is, I always told, because I'm not a gun person, I don't own a gun, they've always told me, they've asked me to simulate the recoil. He uses the words there. When I shot that gun and it went off. Not when I cocked that gun and it went off, or not when the gun shot. He says, when I shot the gun and it went off. I shot the gun, it went off. It is there in his words. And then he corrects himself and he says, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it to do for what happened to happen. And this is a really interesting part of what he says, because quite often when we say something and then go back and correct ourselves, the most truthful, the most interesting part is actually the first part, especially if the first part implies some sort of guilt or some sort of ownership of actions. So he says, when I shot that gun and it went off, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it to do for what happened to happen. And I think this is entirely truthful at the end there. I didn't intend for what happened to happen. I didn't intend to shoot someone I think, is what he is saying there. And I didn't shoot it when I went off, because he said the words, when I shot that gun and it went off. So what I think there is a bit of leakage. I shot the gun and it went off. I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it to do. And I think that is potentially, well, these words could, and just could, cover high spirits. Yeah, they could cover that someone larking about. I thought it'd be funny to squeeze the trigger and there'd be a snap from the gun or something like that. Instead, the gun went off and shot someone. So I think that those words could be used to cover that. I didn't intend for what happened to happen. It was not my intention. I believe that. It's not an intentional maiming, killing, or anything like that. But he does use the words, when I shot the gun and it went off. And you'll notice as well, this whole thing. So when I shot the gun and it went off, I didn't shoot it when it went off. I didn't intend for it for what happened to happen. When that happened, I am always told, because I'm not a gun person, I don't own a gun. They've always told me, they've asked me to simulate recoil. It's very jumpy. He's jumping about from scenario to scenario, from situation to situation. And when I shot the gun, I didn't shoot the gun. I didn't intend for what happened to happen. But what happened is, well, I've always been told, I'm not a gun person. I don't own a gun. They've always told me, simulate the recoil. It's very, very jumpy. The next thing he says is, when I shoot the Colt, which is a big gun, 45 caliber bullet, they always teach me when we shoot, they go action, and I go, get back here, boom. And they make me take my hand and go, boom, kick. Because there's no kick in a flash round. And this time, I don't recall there being any kick either. That's important. Again, very jumpy. It jumps from the Colt, what's always been taught. He then goes into some sort of action from some sort of film and starts acting it out, and then talks very specifically about flash rounds and prop guns. And this time, he doesn't recall there being any kick. He's jumping around there. He talks about when I shoot the Colt, which is in general, when I shoot the Colt. It's not when I shot the Colt. It's when I shoot the Colt. They teach me that I need to act out the recoil. But he does use when I shoot the Colt, and then he says, this time I don't recall there being any kick either. So this is when I shoot the Colt in general, and then he talks about this time when he shot the Colt. He doesn't recall there being any kick either. That's important, he says, and that's what, this is him using maybe his status, maybe him using persuasive or coercive language to tell the detectives what is important. There was no kick there either. And I want to know what he means by kick there either. Either is comparing it to something else, isn't it? And I want to know why he used that word either. We've seen a lot from Alec Baldwin here. We've seen him use a lot of words to describe this incident. I now want you to look at the power of no words, because at the end of the police interview, he's informed that the cinematographer has passed away.
I do have some very unfortunate news to tell you.
What?
She didn't make it. Yeah. So Joel's still at the hospital, but the other person involved didn't make it. Sorry. I just didn't want you to hear it outside of here. Is there something we could do for you?
It says Alec being told, and you can see the shock there, of the death of Rust cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. So in conclusion, well, what's important to him? Alec Baldwin wants to show in this police interview how it's done safely. He wants to show he's got a great knowledge of how movie guns are handled safely and properly. But he doesn't say in the excerpts that we looked at that it was done safely this time. He just talks in general. There's lots of assumptions that he lets slip about what was in the gun that day. He says that you assume it's empty, and he does say at one point he assumed it's empty. So that leads me to believe that he thought, or it would be possible for him to think, that if he pulled the trigger, nothing would happen. He does say he shot the gun. Several times he says he shot the gun. He does talk about cocking the gun, but he does not express it was a surprise to him that the gun went off. The surprise was that ammunition came out of the gun and hit someone, but he doesn't say it was a surprise that the gun went off. What do I think happened? I think he did not pull the trigger. I'm not convinced that happened. I think it's very possible that, looking at the words there, he shot the gun. He had no idea what would happen. He had no idea there was a live round or any kind of round. He had no idea there was any danger in shooting the gun. But I do think that he intended for that trigger to be squeezed, or for the cock to make the gun go off. What do you think? Leave your comments on the platform or get in touch on social media. All the links are in the show notes as well. Subscribe to get more episodes like this as soon as they come. Share it with anyone who's interested in Alec Baldwin or the whole trials and all the legal stuff that's going on around Rust the movie. Or if you don't do any of that, 0.3 seconds like that, bang, will help we'll press the like button. It will help this get to many, many more people. And like I said, if you want to become a member of the channel on YouTube, you will get episodes like this before anyone else. Same as if you subscribe on Spotify. The website is neveratruerword.com. There you will find a whole load more videos analysing the words of people in the news. You'll find more podcasts too. You can find all the social media links there, and you can sign up for the monthly newsletter too. neveratruerword.com. And we'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word.